The following is a potential scenario depicting the early events of World War III. December 11th. The U.S. Department of Defense claims the Islamic State has secured fighter jets, potentially with the complicity of the Syrian government.
The Russian president has warned against...
Putin issues a final warning to Western powers that any more disruptions with Russia, its allies, or trading partners will not be tolerated. January 6th, 2015. After confirmation of cooperation from the United Kingdom, a no-fly zone was placed over Syria. January 10th. A Turkish Air Force plane is shot down over eastern Syria. The same day, President Barack Obama announces to the American people, we have now declared war on Syria.
I ordered our military to take targeted action in Syria. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
The Republican-controlled Congress votes to approve a military intervention. The US and UK began to rally 12,000 troops for a fast and targeted ground invasion, in concert with air shelling over all Syrian military installments. The S&P 500 index drops under 2,000. January 12th.
This international operation is about protecting our people too, and protecting the streets of Britain should not be a task that we are prepared to entirely subcontract to other air forces of other countries.
Riots erupt in London for mass public distaste of the new Middle Eastern war. Scotland begins the process to secede after a last-minute referendum receives a 61% majority of votes. 4 countries joined the Eurasian Economic Union, including Mongolia, and newly established independent eastern Ukraine, entailing free trade and military cooperation. India is set to import a record 180 tons of gold for January and begins talks with Russia for an increased bilateral trade. January 20th. The U.S. decides to send forces without UK cooperation and sends a lackluster army of 5,000 American troops arrive in Turkey that push their way to Aleppo, Syria. In an attempt to demonize Democrats and anti-war activists, Fox has guests Jesse Ventura and Dennis Traynor.
I think it's shameful, and I think that we need new leadership in this country that changes this war mentality that the United States of America has today.
Which turns to chaos, and both guests state they would recommend burning draft cards if issued from the Selective Service. Days later, China does not attend the latest 5-year and 7-year Treasury note auction. The Federal Reserve announces a return to monthly asset purchases to maintain critical defense expenditures. February 11th, submarines went undetected to the U.S. West Coast, destroying key military targets in San Diego. U.S. Secretary of Defense announces the swift sinking of 3 Chinese submarines west of San Clemente Island. Secretary of State John Kerry appears live on CNN to declare the U.S. is now at war with China. Japan announces allegiance with the United States.
We will continue to build a strong Japan-U.S. alliance.
And supplies 12 destroyers to patrol for Chinese warships in the Pacific. Through alternative news websites, it's discovered that on January 30th, secret talks with China for U.S. debt negotiations and to reevaluate gold at $3,200 an ounce and silver at $60 an ounce were denied by the Federal Reserve, and this led to the Chinese strike on American targets. Brazil, the next day after China's attack, announces their allegiance with China against the United States, halting all imports and exports and an intent to sell their $262 billion in Treasury securities at the earliest possible auction. Senator Bernie Sanders proposes a bill to nationalize all Chinese investments in the United States. Australia comes out in the open with gold price talk, noting they would accept up to $1,500 gold price to appease Chinese, but would follow any gold price the U.S. Treasury and Fed will set. Australian coal and gold mining workers go on strike, and China responds with sending 20,000 troops into Australia to, quote, secure China's industrial mineral investments. February 17th.
The Pentagon is going to spend $7.5 billion to make emergency fixes to its nuclear weapons.
The Pentagon allocates $11.9 billion package to modernize and ready nuclear armaments at the National Nuclear Security Administration plant in Kansas City. March 1st, 2015. InfoWars founder Alex Jones has not been seen or appeared on air in the past 10 days. Senior editor Paul Joseph Watson hosts the Alex Jones Show in his absence. March 8th, U.S. troops have secured the northern half of Syria. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, states the U.S. Army has confirmed that ISIS is working side by side with the Syrian government in fighting the American surge. Russians move in to support troops to Iran. The Iranian president announces on Democracy Now! That his country will accept any number of Syrian refugees as well as Palestinian refugees from the ongoing Israeli conflict. American media proclaims the U.S. is crying for help from the world and getting no answer. March 11th, in an attempt to arm anti-Syrian fighters, Saudi Arabia covertly deploys 13 fighter jets, but 4 are intercepted by Iran and shot down. Iran claims they were under hostile attack. Saudi Arabia and Turkey then declare war on Syria and Iran. Rumors circle that the French parliament will vote to leave the European Union, with similar talks in regards to Italy and Poland. Germany states they are remaining neutral in regards to any Eurasian military conflict. Shortly thereafter, Chancellor Angela Merkel announces her resignation. Riots in Central America have provoked a push for revolution in Venezuela. The U.S. deploys Marines and Navy SEALs to invade Cuba and Venezuela. March 13th. An explosion at Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant in California causes a further increase in exodus from California into neighboring states, especially Arizona. Mexican civilians begin pouring into Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and even some to Southern California. MSNBC and CNN pump out propaganda demanding high taxes and welfare for the poor Americans and immigrant refugees from the southern border, saying Republicans hate immigrants, while Fox News paints all of them as illegals dragging down our economy, while calling the increased spending for wars absolutely necessary. Obama prepares executive orders to give refugees American citizenship.
We'll take steps to deal responsibly with the millions of undocumented immigrants who already live in our country.
March 22nd, 8-kiloton nuclear blast has exploded in Charleston, South Carolina. 750 miles northeast, the New York Stock Exchange is shut down. CEO Alex Lundy states the drop in the markets from the S&P 1600 to 900 was a glitch caused by a hack perpetrated by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Senator John McCain, in a closed-door meeting with President and joint military chiefs, announced war with Russia, stating that Russia, along with China, have been fighting a cyber war against the U.S. for at least 2 years. What could happen next? See our ending at crushthestreet.com/war.